Thanks, Carl. Well done. We'll get Tina up here now, talk about temperature profiling outside the ladder entrances on the Lower Columbia projects, Bonneville, the Dalles, John Day. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I work at the water quality section at the Corps. And I'll be going over the background and objectives of this study and also covering the methods for the monitoring of the temperature strings and the overview of the monitoring sites, along with the results and conclusions made, and then the next steps possibly that we could take in the future. The original interest in more rigorous monitoring of water temperatures in the forebays and within the fish ladders of the Lower Columbia dams, including John Day, the Dalles, and Bonneville, have been a concern regarding the water temperature differentials and the subsequent delay of migration of the adult salmonids. Water temperatures are currently monitored at the Lower Columbia River mid-fish ladders and upstream and downstream of the total dissolved gas fixed monitoring sites within the Lower Columbia dams. But there's been no no forebay thermal profile data monitored by these fish ladders in the Lower Columbia dams so far. So the objective with the regional participants of FPOM, they concluded that there should be a study to determine if there's any cooler water at depth near the exits of these forebay fish ladders. And also by determining this, we would put out these temperature profile strings to collect data during the hottest portion of the summer in July and August. And they also determined the most suitable fish ladder exits to monitor near were at the South Fish Ladder at John Day and the East Fish Ladder at the Dalles, and also Bradford and Washington Shore Fish Ladders at Bonneville. The team I worked with was Russ Heaton and Darren Pecoro from Walla Walla. They helped develop the monitoring methods and the installation of the equipment. They've got previous experience from the Lower Snake River dams where they've installed some temperature strings there. These strings consisted of these hobo thermistor loggers that were attached to cables at 5 to 10 interval spaces, 5 feet typically near the surface. And these were pre-programmed to collect hourly temperature data. And then these strings were, I don't know where my pointer is, but these strings were attached to the 30-pound fish weights, and they had buoys on top to flag their positions. And then there was 2 cables coming from the strings with 170-pound steel anchors pictured in the upper left corner. And those were placed upstream of the string, making kind of a tripod to keep the string in place. And then on the right, you can just see a little mushroom weight we used to hold the strings that were attached to the dams themselves, rather than the floating strings. So to determine if the cooler water exists at depths near the fish ladder exits, these strings were installed May 21st to May 23rd on the dam structures themselves. And about a month later, they were installed in the water, the floating strings, on June 18th to 20th. We waited a month later because the flows were up to like 500 kCFS in the forebays. It was just too unsafe. And they receded to about 300 by late June, so it was a little safer in the BRZ float restriction area. And here's a little review of what locations of where we put these strings. This shows the red triangles are the ones attached to the dam structure. The black stars, the fish ladder exit. And the little yellow circles with the black X through are the floating strings. They're at 78 and 90 feet depth. And the ones on the structure were at 60 feet and 101 feet depth. The red circle is the perimeter of 110 feet from the fish ladder. We try to stay outside of 100 feet from the fish ladders. And here at the Dalles East Ladder, there's one mounted on the structure at 60 feet deep, and there was 2 floating strings, one at 51 and 67 feet deep, that were also installed. At Bonneville Bradford Island, there was one mounted near the fish ladder exit, and then one further out at 37 feet deep. It was quite shallow there, so we had to go pretty far out from the fish ladder. And then at the Washington shore, there was 2 floating two floating temperature strings, and they were at 26 feet and 42 feet. The 26-foot one was actually attached to an existing pier there. The results from this temperature data came from these loggers. We removed them September 25th at John Day, and a month later we removed the Dalles and Bonneville temperature strings. And this, there was 94 sensors, and so all that data was manually downloaded back at the office from these onset hobo. Here's a picture of one. They're about 4 inches long. So the data from the resulting temperature strings is pictured here. This is the one string on the dam itself, and there's about a temperature variation up to about 4 degrees. And so there was some stratification going on there. And this is the other string that was attached further north of the first string, and this is also on the dam, and there was again a variation of about 4 degrees in temperature with depth. So there is some stratification going on there. These next 2 slides are the floating strings at John Day, and this is a variation here of about 7 degrees up to that. And there's really more stratification and variation with temperatures than we expected. So this is kind of good to see here. And this is the deepest string, but this one also has a variation with depth of about 7 degrees, but mostly in the ballpark of 3 to 4 degrees. And then this doesn't show, it shows better there. Here I've taken the 2 deepest strings, one from the floating string and one from the one attached to the dam. So I've plotted in the light blue, you've got the surface, like about 5-10 feet deep, the surface temperatures, and in the dark blue is 90 feet and 100 feet temperatures. And they're both, those haven't changed much at the depth, and the ones at the surface, they vary with each other just by about a degree. And then there's some diurnal temperature change going on of about 7 degrees near the surface. In the yellow is the air temperatures from the McDonald's site near John Day, and the green is the water temperatures from the outflow upstream at McNary. So you can see in August, during the hottest portion of the month, there's about a 1 degree difference in temperatures from upstream McNary to John Day, which is the deepest, the navy line, the deeper portion. So it is about a degree warmer, even though it is deeper water. And then the air temperatures, they reached up to about 103, 105 degrees for a few hours on August 9th. But they were typically, through the summer, over 90 degrees for several weeks, so they were quite hot. So even though that there's cooler water at John Day of about 7 degrees, during August, the hottest portion, it's still over 70 degrees, that water, even at 90 to 100 feet depth, so it's quite warm down there. With the Dalles, I plotted all the 3 strings together because there was very little stratification or change with temperature. It was typically less than half a degree. So there wasn't much new news here. We kind of expected that to be more mixed. So here I've just got the surface temperatures and the deepest temperatures plotted. For the Dalles North Fish Ladder, I forgot to mention we did put one over by there too, right on the dam structure. It was only about 21 feet deep, and there wasn't really any change, maybe less than half a degree now and then with depth, so not much change in temperature over there. And at Bonneville Bradford Island, there was just a little more stratification than the Dalles. It was about a half a degree to a degree change with depth and temperature. There was a little bit more up to 2 degrees in early July, and you'll see it at the end of September. There was a little bit more temperature variation, but generally not much change at all. At the Washington shore, again, there was very little change in temperature, less than half a degree. except in early August there was a couple degrees where it was temperatures were, air temperatures spiked. But again, not much change there at all. I took all the maximum changes, put them in a table so you could see. These aren't the average changes, just the maximum difference in temperatures with depth. At the John Day South Shore Fish Ladder, there was changes from 6.3 to 8.2 mostly during July and August, but there was that one June 20th where we had a big change with depth. And then for the Dalles East Fish Ladder, there was a change, maximum change in temperature of 1.5 degrees on August 5th. And at the Bonneville Bradford Island, the maximum change was 2.1, and that was July 11th. And then at the Washington Shores, it was only 1.4 maximum change with depth, and that was on August 6th. So there were some bigger spikes at the John Day location for sure. So conclusions I've drawn from this is that, as we've seen, it's obvious that there's some stratification going on in cooler water at depth at the John Day South Fish Ladder exit. And the temperatures are varying basically between 3 to 7 degrees with depth. Water temperatures at the Dalles near the East Fish Ladder and Bonneville, Bradford Island, and Washington Shore have very little stratification or very little change in temperature with depth as well. These are more well-mixed areas. And when you're out there on a boat too in the BRZ, you can feel that they're very well-mixed because it was much more velocity and currents going on than compared to the John Day South Fish Ladder, which was more of a calmer area. So what are the next steps? Was the amount of stratification at John Day typical? Was there less wind this past summer than normal? I think that we should perform or do another study next summer during these hot times and compare and see if there's any variation from what we saw this past year. Maybe we could put out a couple more strings, although there was little difference in temperature between the locations we chose. I'm not sure if the North Fish Ladder is of interest at all. I'd be curious to see compared to the South and North if it varies at all either within that general forebay area. And here's a picture of the workboat in front of the John Day Fish Ladder. There's a yellow floating buoy on the right, marking one of the temperature strings. I also want to thank the OPMs at the projects, the biologists, the rangers, and the workboat crew at Bonneville. They all helped with these installations. And here's a picture of the workboat crew at Bonneville. They're actually welding a cable onto this pier so we could attach the temperature string there. So they were very helpful. That was very turbulent there, so I appreciated their help. Felt a lot safer. Thank you.
Questions for Tina?
I was curious to know, so you showed there is a variation of temperature, daily temperature variation up to 7 degrees. So some of the days there is a variation is very low, especially in September 19 to 29 is very high variability. And then before the September 19, before that week, there is a low variability. So, but also I looked at the air temperature, there is a no variation. So what's the reason behind it? Maybe because of the flow is high, so therefore there is a no go back. This one.
This one, you want to know at John Day?
No, another go back.
Go back. Okay,
Which one?
That one, yeah, with the spikes at the end of September.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I haven't really fleshed out why there's such a variation there because the temperatures were hotter in like August. Temperatures are very hot then. So I'm really not quite sure. I just got this data beginning of last week, so I want to kind of work with it a little more when I write up my summary report and flesh that out. So I wish I could have an answer for you, but I'm really not sure why they're showing bigger variation there in temperatures.
So that is very important for the fish. You know, the 7 degrees is a huge fluctuation.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a note too to kind of look into that a little more, see if I can get something that coordinated with that spike.
Thank you, Tina.
Okay, thank you very much.